Well, first of all, I'm going to say thank you all very, very much, and I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to see these tables of Georgians who are here, and delighted to have a chance to be back. I did turn to Harold just now and say, now, you know, how much time do I have? And he said, you take as much as you want, having forgotten that I used to be a college teacher, and that can go on for a really long time, so I'll try not to impose on you too much. I also want to say on behalf of Georgia that we are all looking forward to you coming to Atlanta this summer, and I hope all of you are going to plan to be with us in Atlanta for the ALEC convention this summer. Let me test out a couple of questions I'm very curious about for a second. How many of you think that you know more about how to solve problems in your state than Washington does? I'm just trying to get, you know, I'm trying to get a feel here. How many of you find it almost unimaginable that your government has acquired $7.7 trillion of liabilities this year? Okay, I'm just trying to get, you know, I once said to somebody, I campaigned very hard to stop John Kerry because I knew he was to the left of Teddy Kennedy, and I was afraid he might nationalize the banks. Now, what I want to do in a very short time, I'm going to give you an outline rather than a speech. But what I want to start with is a book by Peter Drucker called The Age of Discontinuities, which he wrote back in the 1960s. And in The Age of Discontinuities, what Drucker argues is that you have trend lines until you hit a discontinuity. And when you hit a discontinuity, you actually don't know what comes out the other side, and you don't know what the new lines are like. So if you think about being really good at thinking through stagecoaches, and then somebody comes along and invents the railroad. Railroads aren't just marginally faster stagecoaches. They're fundamentally different institutions. And if you get reasonably good at transcontinental railroad travel for passengers, and somebody comes along and invents the airline, airlines aren't just, you know, railroads that can fly. Airlines have fundamentally different patterns. Well, I want to argue that I think it would help all of you, and when you go back home, it would help your legislatures if you took a deep breath and stopped. Because what we're doing right now, and you see this in the bailout process, what we're doing right now is we are trying to prop up the past rather than accelerate the invention of the future. Now, this is strategically a dead loser. And the reason, and it's very painful to go through what I'm about to describe to you, and so politicians try to avoid the pain, but what they do by trying to avoid the pain is they actually deepen it and extend it. The Japanese went through a crisis after 1988-89, and they managed to turn it into a 13-year recession because they couldn't bring themselves to solve their problems. Now, we have been piling up problems for at least 2 decades. I believe, and we founded American Solutions, because I have 2 missions. One is to ensure that my 2 grandchildren, Maggie, who's 9, and Robert, who's 7, when they're in their 40s, I want them to live in the most prosperous, most productive country in the world, which would also make it the safest country in the world. For that to happen, we have to be prepared to compete with China and India. And for us to compete with China and India, we have to reform litigation, regulation, taxation, education, infrastructure, energy, and health. Now, and so the reason I helped create American Solutions is I think it's this big. And I just want to start with that. You are entering a new world. The sooner you and your fellow legislators and your governors understand it's a new world, and the sooner you start thinking anew, to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln in December of 1862, who said, as our situation is anew, we must think anew. The sooner you can do that, the faster you're going to be able to get to real solutions, which will not resemble marginally better or worse examples of the current system, because the current system is incapable of competing with China and India. The second major mission that we've undertaken at American Solutions is very simple. If you go to americansolutions.com and you click on Platform of the American People, we took 9 national surveys looking for tripartisan issues. That is, issues that had a majority of Democrats, a majority of Republicans, and a majority of independents. We've found over 100 so far, so instead of red versus blue, we can talk about red, white, and blue. And it turns out that the natural center-right majority of this country runs between 63 and 92%, depending on the issue. And yet we are governed by a machine on the left. And so our second major assignment is to reach out on a tripartisan basis to Democrats, Republicans, and independents to develop a governing mechanism that would actually reflect the values of the American people. I'll give you three simple examples you can take home with you. The first is that by 89%, the American people favor English as the official language of government. That's an absolute majority of Democrats, Republicans, independents, and an absolute majority of Latinos. By about 92%, the country thinks we should be investing more in math and science education. And by about 91%, the country believes that one nation under God should remain in the Pledge of Allegiance. So you can begin to imagine how you would build a base that said, A, I want to compete successfully with China and India economically, and B, I want to be able to have my values represented in the courts and my values represented in the bureaucracy. And to be really daring, I'd like my values to be represented in the classroom so that the people we pay to teach our children actually reflect the country that's paying them. Now, let me talk briefly about the scale of the bailout, which I have consistently thought was a big mistake, and I think it'll prove to be a total mess. I want to encourage all of you to look at Congressman Louis Gohmert from Texas, who has developed a proposal because he figured out about a week ago that the second half of the proposed bailout, the $350 billion, actually can translate into an income and FICA tax holiday for all of January and February. That is, you could either loan the money out to the auto companies and the banks and whatever, or every American could have all of their take-home pay, both income tax and FICA, and every small business could keep their FICA match for all of January and February. Now, if you added to it Speaker Pelosi's proposed $700 billion stimulus package, you would have an income tax and FICA tax holiday through June. Now, there are two reasons. I happen to like this proposal for a couple of reasons. Theoretically, I'm in favor of a permanent tax cut. I understand that argument. I actually wrote an article a week ago with Peter Ferrara in the Wall Street Journal favoring a permanent tax cut. But I like what Gohmert did for two reasons. The first is he scales the size of the money to a human proportion. He suddenly says, these guys want us to send to Washington for them to spend every penny you're going to pay in FICA and income tax for all of January and February, and that's just the bailout. And then they want you to send every penny you're going to pay in March, April, May, and June in order to have a stimulus package designed by politicians, implemented by bureaucrats. Now, you could have a fair argument back home by asking a simple question. Which do you think would stimulate America more? Let you keep your own money so you get to pick which auto company you want to bail out, or have the politicians and the bureaucrats do it? So any of you who'd like to go home and talk about the Gohmert plan, I recommend it highly. I do a newsletter every week, which is free. It's at newt.org. It goes out to about 850,000 people. This week's was on that topic. If you don't get it and you're interested in what we're doing, it's easy, just go to newt.org and sign up.